Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Faust. I'm up here today actually to welcome Honorable Mickey Cantor to the stage. Mickey is a director of the Pacific Council on International Policy and former Secretary of Commerce and U.S. Trade Representative. He will be joining us now. Thank you, Mickey.
Everyone, thank you, Jen, very much. Welcome, of course, Tony Seba. Thank you for doing this today and joining us. Everyone is waiting for your remarks with great anticipation. Jerry Green, for you to. Jerry's done a fabulous job in running the Pacific Council. Ambassador Lee, thank you for being here. It's very important that you're here and that the U.S. Korea Foundation and the Pacific Council are working together. Also, our Consul General to Los Angeles from Korea is here as well. We appreciate it very much. Our co-chair of the Pacific Council, Mark Nathanson, is with us. Mark, thank you for being here. I know you just needed a lunch, but that's it's very nice you're here anyway. And Michelle Kim, who's on the Board of Supervisors of Orange County, thank you for being here as well. We appreciate it very much. This is an inaugural SeouLA Forum. Everyone knows that in the city of Los Angeles we have more American Koreans than anywhere outside of Korea in the world. This is the largest Korean community. It is a vital community and important to Los Angeles and important to the state of California and, of course, to the country. And this relationship here in Los Angeles is vital. And we hope to continue, don't we, Jerry, to build this. And I appreciate the foundation for doing what you're doing because I think it's vital to the U.S.-Korea relationship. I'm not going to bore you with trade statistics and numbers except to say this is a very difficult time in trade generally, and even between the U.S. and Korea in trade, as the administration seems to want to criticize anyone who has a trade surplus with the United States. Let me just make one comment. Trade surpluses are not built on people cheating. They're built on the economic realities. The U.S. is a consumer nation. The larger our economy, the faster we grow, the larger our trade deficit. That's over the years, that's exactly what's happened. Why? Because the more money in the pockets of Americans tend to spend it. And other nations tend to be more dependent on exports and tend to export to the United States. The Korean-U.S. Free Trade Agreement has been a success on all parts. I want to make sure everyone here understands that, and what we need to do is support it, but more importantly, support this relationship. Just look at a map sometimes and see where Korea sits. On the border of North Korea, on the border of China, very close to Japan, vital to our security interests in North Asia, in the Pacific as a whole. And so in supporting trade and supporting a growth of trade between our two nations and supporting the interaction of our populations and the cross-investment supports us strategically as well. It is important to our vital interests. I have the pleasure now of introducing the head of the U.S.-Korea, or the Korea-U.S. Foundation.
Thank you, Secretary Cantor. Again, thank you, Secretary Mickey Cantor and dear Jerry Green and His Excellency Korean Consul General Lee Gi-cheol and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Well, on behalf of Korea Foundation, it is really great honor and privilege to co-host the SeouLA 2017 Forum in partnership with the Pacific Council on International Policy. One of the Korea Foundation's signature programs is to host bilateral and regional forums in many countries such as the United States, China, Japan, Europe, Australia, and many other parts of the world. In case of the United States, we have thus far primarily hosted our forums on the East Coast and most of them were related to security and policy-oriented issues, given the grave security situation on and surrounding Korean Peninsula. Today, I am excited to launch the SeouLA 2017 Forum together with the PCIP. I'm excited because we are having this forum not in Washington, D.C., but in Los Angeles, California here. And the issues are different from the ones we used to have there in Washington, D.C. before. When Dr. Gerald Green visited my office last June, both of us agreed to host a forum that focuses on future-oriented issues, technology and innovation in revitalizing economic growth and enhancing economic cooperation between Korea and the United States. But this choice of theme could not have been more natural for me. The venue was decided to be California, the historic gateway to trans-Pacific trade and the home of innovation and new ideas for our future life. I'm sure that the issues of technology, innovation, economy, and jobs are never less important than the security issue. I believe the United States economy on the Pacific coast is no less vibrant than the one on the Atlantic coast. As you can see, SeouLA 2017 Forum is unique in its conception. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is well known that Korea, that was a recipient country until not a long time ago, became the first member of the OECD Development Assistance Committee, DAC. Second, the US offered the largest and freest market, not only for domestic, but foreign traders as well, as long as they were committed to the rules of the game. Third, after joining the GATT in 1967, Korea became one of the major beneficiaries of the multilateral free trading system, which was established and reinforced by the advanced economies of the free world led by the United States. Having successfully established political democracy in addition to economic development, Korea has become an even stronger supporter of the global leadership of the United States. During recent several years, Korea played its leadership role at the G20, APEC, nuclear security, cybersecurity, etc., by taking turns with the United States. These are just a few examples of Korea's successful global partnership with the United States. As such, Korea has been in close cooperation with the US, not only in defending global free trade, but also expanding democracy for a freer and more secure world. This is why Korea defines the relationship between our two countries as a value alliance. While coming back to today's theme, Korea is the sixth largest partner of the United States in goods trading with a $1 trillion scale GDP. Major US firms have long been leading investors in Korea, while Korea's top firms have made significant investment in the US, creating tens of thousands of jobs. In spite of the rapid rise of China as a major trading partner of both Korea and the United States, our two countries are still indispensable trading partners to each other. There are significant large-scale flows of manufactured goods, agricultural products, services, and technology between our two countries. The landmark Korea-US Free Trade Agreement, which was signed in 2007 and entered into force in 2012, underscores the depth of our bilateral trade ties. With the KORUS FTA entering in sixth year, the interdependence of the two countries has become more complex, and the two economies are more intertwined than ever before. I have no doubt that the KORUS FTA has been beneficial to Koreans and Americans alike. Maybe I should save more details comment on this aspect for the panelists of the second session of our discussion this afternoon. Well, since the global financial crisis of the 2007, it became a known fact that the global community is living in a new normal economic environment, which is unfortunately much more unfavorable to us all than before. Economy without innovation can barely survive. Even under these circumstances, some countries like the United States are doing better than others in terms of the economic performance. But the prosperity of a lone country is not sustainable anymore. We have to find a way of moving forward together to cope with challenges that we face in common. We have to share our wisdom on how to grasp opportunities through the technology innovation available to us. To me, this is the reason why we are gathered here today. In spite of the time limit given to us this afternoon, I sincerely hope our SeouLA 2017 Forum will serve as an invaluable vehicle to explore ways to reach the goals I just mentioned. Ladies and gentlemen, friendship between countries should never be taken for granted. On the contrary, it is only awarded when a country trying to befriend others is seen by the latter as worthy of the friendship. And both Korea and the United States have qualities worthy of it. I believe both countries have the willingness and desire to learn from each other and acculturate into universal values and norms. In concluding, I would like to take this opportunity to express my appreciation to Dr. Gerald Green and his colleague in the PCIP for their hard work and commitment to making this gathering possible. I also thank all the participants and guests from Korea and the United States for willingly sacrificing Friday afternoon of this beautiful spring season. I'm sure that all of us will be rewarded by the high quality presentation and discussions afterwards. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.
Now we are pleased to welcome Ambassador Hee-Chol Lee to the podium. He serves as the Consul General of Korea here in Los Angeles. Ambassador Lee, we are pleased to hear your remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lee Gi-chul. I'm Consul General of South Korea to Los Angeles. Sharon asked me how I feel about Los Angeles, so I'd like to tell you how I feel here. Well, as a career diplomat, I lived in 7 foreign countries, and also I traveled to more than 100 cities in the world. But since I first visited Los Angeles together with my wife in 1987, it has been my dream, our dream, to live in Los Angeles sometime in the future. As many as 30 years later, we got hold of the heavenly blessing of coming to this beautiful city of Los Angeles. You may take everything for granted, but in the eyes of foreigners, you are all blessed people to live in Los Angeles. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm very much honored to make a congratulatory remark in 2017 SeouLA Forum. First of all, I thank Ambassador Lee Si-young, the President of Korea Foundation, and Dr. Gerald Green, the President of PCIP, for your initiatives to host today's meaningful and timely forum. I also welcome Professor Park Tae-ho and distinguished professors who came all the way from Seoul. The theme of today's forum is economic prosperity between South Korea and the United States. And President Lee Si-young has already mentioned the economic aspect. But I also think it would be meaningful to look into some non-economic factors that affect environment for common prosperities. One of these factors is the perception of the Korean people on the United States and the perception of American people on South Korea. then what is the perception of South Korean people on the United States? We Korean people feel very grateful to the United States because United States helped South Korea survive the Korean War and continue to support South Korea even after the war by providing economic aid and sometimes by awakening the importance of democracy. And we all Korean people know that. So there is no problem at all. Now, what does South Korea mean to the United States? I believe South Korea is also a very meaningful country to the United States for several reasons. First of all, South Korea has become the best example demonstrating that the American value, which is democracy and market economy, prevails. Out of 80 countries in the world which became independent after World War II, South Korea is the only one country that achieved both democracy and economic development. It is unprecedented in the world history. Such a remarkable development of South Korea was possible because South Korea adopted the democracy and market economy system from the United States since the liberation from Japan in 1945. Therefore, the success story of South Korea is not just a success story of itself, it is also the success story of the United States. Secondly, South Korea greatly served the interests of the United States now. The ROK-US military alliance has been a linchpin of the peace and security in Northeast Asia. This military alliance has been expanded to global alliance in the field of non-proliferation, anti-terrorism, climate issues, and human rights issues. In addition, South Korea is now world number 6 trading partner of the United States, overtaking France last year. Lastly, South Korea is one of the most similar countries to the United States in the world in terms of value system and social system. Many Korean leaders in Korean society, they studied in the United States when they were young, like the Korean participant here today. And they learned the advanced system of the United States, and they implement them when they come back home. In spite of these exceptional relations, the American people know very little about South Korea and the exceptional relations between our two countries. In order to foster a favorable environment for economic prosperity, I believe we need to raise the awareness of the American people about South Korea and the special relations between our two countries. Basically, it is the responsibility of my Consulate General and also Korea Foundation. But I would like to ask you here to join us in disseminating these exceptional relations here in the United States. But I think I talked too much. And you may forget everything that I said today, but just to remember one thing, the success story of South Korea is a success story of the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Lee. So we're turning to the next part of our program, which is the keynote presentation by Mr. Tony Seba. After he gives his presentation, we'll take audience questions, so please be prepared with those. Before I turn the podium over to Mr. Seba, I want to give a few highlights from his biography for you. Mr. Seba is a widely recognized entrepreneur and educator. He's currently an instructor in entrepreneurship, disruption, and clean energy at Stanford's Continuing Studies program. His areas of expertise include clean energy, market disruption, and technological innovation. He's also a serial Silicon Valley entrepreneur with 2 decades of experience in high-tech and clean technology companies. We are so pleased to have him join us today. Now I'd like to welcome you to the podium, Mr.
All right, thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you so much for making the time to be here and for the invitation to address this kind audience. So before I take you into the future of transportation and energy and the disruption of energy and transportation, let me take you into the past. So New York City, 1900, not LA or Seoul, New York City. There's a sea of horses. Horses were the main means of transportation for human beings for thousands of years. Can anyone see the one car in this picture? There is one car in this picture. So there it is. It doesn't even look like a car, right? 13 years later, can anyone see the one horse in that picture? 13 years. That's all it took for New York City to go from all horse to all car, -1. 13 years. And if anyone in 1900 had said, we're on the cusp of a disruption of transportation, what do you think they would have said to that person? You're insane, right? Technology, the disruptions, at the time it was the internal combustion engine automobile. When disruptions happen, they can happen very, very quickly, as this shows. So what is a disruption? Essentially, let me define it before I move on. Basically, it's when there is a convergence of technologies that make it possible for entrepreneurs and companies to put together products and services that do two things. One is create new markets. Think Uber, for instance. Think Airbnb. Think digital cameras. Create new markets, and also at the same time, or eventually, either radically transform or weaken or even destroy existing industries. So that's what a disruption is. And let me take you into a couple of examples. In 1985, many of you were not born there, but in 1985, the then largest company, telecom company on earth, AT&T, hired the most expensive consulting company on earth and asked them one question. Look, we have this thing called a cell phone. What is going to be, we're thinking about investing into that market. What do you think the market's going to be in 15 years? So by the year 2000, how many users of this thing will there be in America? So McKinsey did whatever it is that they do, and they came back, and this is their answer. 900,000. McKinsey thought, I'm sure they charged more than that. Pretty sure. The actual number was, right, 109 million. My little dog could do better, really, and charge less. But all jokes aside, that's the difference between what experts usually think or say and what in reality happens when disruptions hit. And of course, they don't get it for a reason. But also for AT&T, not only did they get disrupted, but also they missed out on some of the largest wealth creation opportunities of the 21st century. So if you look on the right, that's the top 15 listed internet/mobile companies. That's a market valuation of $2.4 trillion. And I actually was looking a couple of days ago at just the top 5. The top 5 internet companies today, 2 days ago, were valued at $2.8 trillion. Apple and Google and Amazon and so on. $2.8 trillion. And those are the types of opportunities that disrupted companies don't take in it. Like I said, it's usually smart people, experts who miss out on disruptive opportunities. So another example, you remember Kodak? Yeah, should I say more? Let me move on. 2000 was a record year. Record, right? And essentially, what happened within 12 years, they were bankrupt. Enough said, right? So if I were to add something to this slide, I would say, where is the digital camera, right, to 2000? And anyway, so the question, my work, is partly to answer this question. Why do smart people at smart organizations consistently fail to anticipate, let alone lead market disruptions? So I've been working on this for many years to understand it, and not only in hindsight, but also to be able to anticipate it. And essentially created a new framework, and I'll quickly walk you through some of the key things. One is technologies. Technologies move in, they have cost curves, and they get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and better. And you can actually anticipate that. I mean, Moore's law of computing has been around for decades, and essentially it says that every 2 years the computing performance on a per dollar basis improves every year at about 41%. And it has for decades. And if that continues, then you can essentially see how that may affect new markets and so on. And that's not, all of Silicon Valley, by the way, was built on Moore's law. All of it. I was an early employee at a little company called Cisco Systems. And we built the internet and whatever. And we were looking at Moore's law, and we were looking at other laws, right? Digital imaging and bandwidth and so on, and each one of them has its own technology cost curve. And so when you put it all together, I mean, today I'm looking at about a dozen key technologies that are moving exponentially at different rates, and you can essentially anticipate the convergence of certain technologies, and that different technology convergence basically affects different industries. So if you look at any industry, healthcare, construction, energy, transport, everything will be disrupted over the next 10 to 15 years. It's just a matter of when and how. So business model innovation is also really important. So if you look at companies like Uber, Didi, Ola, and so on, they're business model innovations more than technology innovation. Because they took advantage of the cloud and the smartphone infrastructure, and they disintermediated a very inefficient industry. It's a business model thing. Same thing with Airbnb. Airbnb is a business model disruption, because business model innovation can be very disruptive. In the same way, solar in the US, residential and commercial, if you look at the growth curve, yes, solar prices have been coming down very quickly. But if you look at the curve of consumer adoption, the introduction of a business model called zero money down solar, that's when it really took off. And the data is there. So business model innovation is every bit as disruptive as technology innovation. So I put all of that together, and I applied it to energy and transportation to figure out, to study, to anticipate how technologies were going to disrupt our system of energy and transportation. And that's where clean disruption happened. So I'll walk you through the 4 key technologies and how they are disruptive independently of each other. But when you put them together, they're super disruptive, and basically that's the clean disruption. That's everything. The executive summary, all of energy and transportation will be disrupted, and it's going to be pretty much over by 2030. And the convergence is 2020. We can go home now, right? But let me walk you through each one of them. So batteries. This battery is lithium-ion battery. This is what powers, for instance, a Tesla Model S. Well, actually, not this one, 7,000 of this one. From about 1995 to about 2010, the lithium-ion batteries improved on a dollar basis by about 14% per year. 14%. And in fact, from about 2010, 2 new industries came into the space, energy and transport companies. And that cost curve has actually accelerated. From 2010, it's been 20% per year. So you can map out that improvement over the next few years and see how it could disrupt markets, right? So why? Because mega factories are increasing. Now a lot of folks are looking at the opportunities in batteries and the disruption of electric vehicles, grid storage, and so on, and investing massive amounts of money. That geeky-looking guy on the picture, that's me, visiting Samsung SDI factory south of Seoul. Samsung SDI, LG Chem, Kokam, there are a lot of companies investing billions of dollars but not only them, in leading this disruption. That's why the technology cost curve has actually accelerated. It may yet even accelerate more. But even companies like Dyson, it's a vacuum cleaner company, right? They invested £1 billion, or announced that they're investing £1 billion in batteries, and they said they're getting into the electric car business. They make vacuum cleaners, right? Talk about a clean disruption. But the point is, what right do they have? Do they even have the skills to build an electric car? I'll come back to that. But so if you do a 16% cost curve over the next few years of lithium-ion batteries, basically these are the numbers that we can anticipate. It could slow down a little, it could go faster. In fact, it's now 20%. But even if you put 20%, this is what we're looking at. And based on that, we can make all kinds of predictions as to what's going to be disrupted first. And this grid storage is going to be disrupted first. So peakers, peaking power, for those of you who know what that is, essentially will be disrupted because the cost of peaking power is very, very expensive. And any energy plus battery right now is more expensive than solar, especially plus batteries, is right now cheaper than peaking power. And even conventional energy CEOs are saying by 2020 there will be no more peakers. Boom, period. I mean, that disruption is already starting to happen today. Tesla built a big battery here north of LA in 3 months. Right, that essentially disrupted a whole natural gas infrastructure that was being built. Residential, again, costs are going down so quickly that by 2020, the average American home will be able to have 24 hours of energy storage at home, 24 hours, for about $1 a day. $1 a day, right? Those of you who live in LA and pay $200, $300, $400 in the summer, know that $1 a day will save you a lot of money, right? And that is disruptive to the most expensive form and the most profitable form of energy for utilities. So from 2020 to 2030, essentially this is going to happen. Everything, every building and house and mall and car and everything is going to have batteries because they're going to be so cheap and because they're going to be cheaper than electric power that we can buy from the outside. And another disruption that batteries will help enable is electric vehicles. And I'm not going to talk much about Tesla Model S, best car ever made, according to many publications, including mainstream publications now. Not the best EV, best car ever made, right? Consumer Reports gave it a rating of 103. Not 100, 103, right? That sounds like a Hollywood movie, right? It's 11, it's not 10. And by the way, it's already the best-selling luxury car in its category. Already, the best-selling luxury car. It's already beating Audi and BMW and Mercedes and so on and so forth, right? Not because of environmental reasons, but because it is the best car. You gotta drive one if you haven't. But here's a minor question. Who can afford an electric vehicle? That's a minor detail, right? But another question, is it disruptive? Is the EV disruptive, or is it just another Porsche or Lamborghini or whatever, right? So I'll give you a few reasons quickly why it is disruptive. The electric drivetrain, the electric motor, converts 95% of the energy in the battery into usable power. Your car, assuming you have a gasoline car or diesel, converts only about 17 to 21%. 80% of the energy in the tank literally goes to waste in the air and heat. But that in and of itself is not what's disruptive. If you combine that with the fact that electricity is cheaper to move electrons than atoms, meaning diesel and gas, you get that on a per mile basis, it's 10 times cheaper to to charge an EV than it is 10 times cheaper to power an EV on a per mile basis once you buy it. This is your car, basically. It has 2,000 plus moving parts, the drivetrain. 2,000 plus moving parts. The EV has 20, right? That's 1% of the moving parts, which means it requires essentially almost no maintenance, almost no maintenance. There's a company here in LA called Tesloop that has used Model S and Model X for transportation. And the CEO tells me that the most expensive item so far has been changing the tires. And they've put in like 200 plus thousand miles already. And that's why companies like Tesla offer infinite mile warranty for 8 years. Infinite. You can drive this thing to the moon and back as long as it's within 8 years, and they'll warranty everything. So basically, EVs are doing this. That arrow says for the last 100 years, the car industry has sold cars in the following way. You want high performance, Porsche and so on, then you pay high money. You want medium performance, then you pay medium money. And low performance, low money, right? What EVs are doing is shifting that basis of competition to the point where internal combustion engine, ICE vehicles cannot compete, period, cannot compete. So the only, and soon you're gonna be able to get Porsche performance for Buick prices. So neither Porsche nor Buick will be able to compete when you can do that. The only question is, when is that gonna happen? And so how quickly is that transition gonna happen, like this transition happened? Let's do the numbers based on the cost of lithium ion and the cost of EVs relative to lithium ion and so on. Essentially, this is what we come up with. By 2017, 2018, the industry, not just Tesla, will have several in the market 200-mile plus EVs in the market commercialized. And we see the first two already. We see the GM Bolt and we see the Tesla Model 3, and many have been announced recently for either late 2017 or 2018. So this curve seems to be, which was published in 2014, seems to be working. By 2020, and even faster, actually, by 2020, they'll be able to build $30,000 EVs with 200-mile range. Now, why 200-mile range? Because that's the minimum that you need to go to the mainstream market. I mean, that's the minimum at which they'll feel okay, even though the daily commute is 30 miles, well, maybe not in LA, but 200 miles is. So by 2020, an EV with 200-mile range, did I say the performance of a Porsche is gonna cost $30,000. The average, the median new car in America is $33,000. So by 2020, an EV is gonna cost less than the median car, it's gonna be more powerful, and it's gonna be 10 times cheaper to maintain and 10 times cheaper to fuel. What do you think people are gonna do? This is the massive migration of the mainstream market. That's only 3 years away. We're not talking about 2030, right? This is when the convergence happens, and when the disruption happens, it's very quickly. And even the low end will be disrupted by about 2022. And these are examples of companies that are already coming to market with 200-plus mile EVs. I'm not talking about hybrids. I'm talking about pure electric vehicles. I mean, that's what's disruptive. And like I said before, business model innovations are also important and can help accelerate disruptions. And so this is basically a way for houses to power themselves using an electric vehicle. This technology already exists. Nissan is already trialing it. You can actually take your EV, charge it at work, come back home and power your home with your EV, right? And a 200-mile EV can charge the average American home for 2 days. 2 days. Talk about disruptive. So EVs are not just a one-to-one substitution. They're disruptive in that way. And I did the numbers for Korea. If every car in Korea were electric, essentially they could store 75% of the electricity demand in Korea, daily electricity demand. In cars, right? In cars today, when it makes the transition. So basically what these numbers say is that by 2025, all new vehicles will be electric. All new cars, buses, SUVs, and so on will be electric because of that cost curve. By 2025, there will be no new ICE vehicles. Now, that's a big disruption. This is an even bigger one. The autonomous vehicle disruption, self-driving. Now, a lot of folks think that self-driving is the future. Guess what? If you go to Singapore, on your way back to Seoul, you can take a taxi, self-driving taxi. Self-driving. You can already take it in Singapore today. This is not the future. I mean, this is the result of a company that was started through an MIT and the government of Singapore joint venture. It's already on the road. And there are 33 companies, 33, this is not startup companies, 33 companies today working on self-driving technology. And look at the names. I mean, these are large multi-billion-dollar companies, not just startup companies in Silicon Valley. Uber already started testing its self-driving service in Pittsburgh. It has already several. California has basically given permission to 27 companies to trial self-driving cars this year. And level 5, which is the max, no wheels, no pedals or anything, may be approved in California as early as the end of this year. So Tesla says that basically by the end of this year, every single car that comes out of their factories is going to be fully self-driving. Now, regulation may not permit it, but the technology will be there to do it. And of course, they'll have to adapt to what regulation is in each place. And according to the U.S. Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Tesla is already 40%. The Tesla from 2016 is 40% safer because of the self-driving technology than the one before. And if all you do is improve by 40% per year, basically self-driving cars will be 5 times safer than humans by about 2020. And that doesn't include software, which is deep learning technology, which is actually what's going down even more quickly. So again, so what? It's going to be cool that we'll do Facebook and this and that while we not drive. What's the cost of this thing? So here's the cost. 2 key technologies. One is LiDAR sensor, which in 2012 was $70,000. And of course, what did the experts say in 2012? Not going to happen, right? $70,000, too much money. What did happen was that about a year later, the next generation LiDAR was $10,000. Not bad for technology cost curves, right? 10,000 is more doable. And then, the CEO of a Silicon Valley company announced in my class, yeah, we're building a $1,000 LiDAR. One. So from 70,000 to 1,000 inside of 3-4 years. Okay, so that's one of the, and wait, there's more. They also announced the $250 LiDAR solid state. That's the latest one. So, this technology has gone from 70 grand to $250 within 5 years, right? Not bad. And the other one is, and I won't even say that their next generation product, LiDAR, is $90. You'll be able to have LiDAR in your smartphone. I don't know what you'll do with it, but you can have it. You walk into a party and you scan everybody, and you know. So look, what's that? So here's the key thing to understand about electric vehicles and self-driving. They're computers on wheels. You know, they only have 20 moving parts. They have a big battery. They're essentially computers on wheels. And so that's why you're getting a lot of technology companies, Tesla, Apple, Google, and so on, Uber, developing self-driving, because this thing is a computer on wheels, and computers and electronics companies are in a great position to disrupt this market. The other part that the other key technology is supercomputing. So LiDAR generates about 1 gigabyte of data per second, whatever that is, right? It's a lot. So you need a supercomputer to process all that. And just to give you an idea, this was the largest supercomputer in the world in the year 2000 at Sandia National Labs in New Mexico, and it was used for nuclear simulations and so on. And it was the size of this room, and it cost $50 million. Last year, the CEO of NVIDIA announced, and that was a 1 teraflops computer, 1 trillion floating point operations, whatever that is per second. So NVIDIA announced the 2 teraflops GPU for $59, okay, last year. And in fact, this year they announced the 11 teraflops CPU, a GPU, not CPU, GPU, specifically for deep learning and self-driving and so on. So the cost curve of both of these key technologies make it possible to add self-driving for less than $1,000 already. So what? So how is this disruptive? Other than, we'll do Facebook and email and, trade and all that stuff while we not drive. How is it disruptive? Here's how. Transport as a service. So the key thing to consider here is this, that your car, where is your car now? Parked. It's so expensive. It's our second biggest capital expense as a consumer after our houses, and yet we only use them 4% of the time. So any asset that's being used 4% of the time, in my book, is waiting to be disrupted. Any high, expense asset. So essentially, when you converge the business model of car sharing with self-driving, this is what you get. You get transportation as a service. I, in fact, have not owned a car in 10 years. I've used this. My smartphone is my car. I don't own a car, but I have access to tens of thousands of cars. So I've shifted from ownership to access. It gives me access to more. So the future of will be electric, self-driving, and shared. And the combination of that is basically transportation as a service. And so when you have that, utilization goes from 4% to 40%, 60%, 80%, depending on whether you're moving goods or people or what it is. So even assuming a 40% improvement in utilization, which is 10 hours a day of usage, the cost on a per mile basis is going to go down by 10x. 10x on day one, when level 5 self-driving is approved, which we anticipate it's going to be around 2020 or 2021. And again, this is not in the future. GM already announced that the Bolt electric Lyft, they invested $500 million into Lyft. And self-driving, they're already trialing that to see how this model works of transportation as a service. So there are 3 dimensions to the disruption of transportation. It's going to go from all gasoline to all electric, from human-driven to self-driven, and from ownership to shared. And when you combine all that, that's where the big disruption is going to happen. And it's all gathering momentum, and the tipping point is going to be 2020. The average American is going to save $5,600 a year minimum. It's going to essentially generate $1 trillion additional dollars of consumer spending, because we're going to spend basically a tenth of the cost in transportation. To give you an idea, going from Seoul to Busan will cost $10. $10, right? Using this model of transportation as a service. What are you paying today? So, rhetorical question. Also, parking is going to be obsolete. So 80-90% of parking, especially in the high real estate areas, gone. Because instead of parking 90%, 96% of the time, cars are going to be driving around most of the time. So I'll leave the question as to what, and also, of course, the car fleet is going to be 80% smaller, because we're not going to need that many cars to do all the miles that we do. So fewer cars, less parking. What percent of LA is parking and roads? Think about it. More than 2/3. That's what's going to be the disruption. It's not just energy and transportation. It's going to disrupt real estate. It's going to disrupt our lifestyle and so on. So the last disruption that I want to talk about is solar. And let me start with this interesting fact. There is this school in Copenhagen, Denmark, that generates 50% of its energy needs, annual energy needs, with solar. 50%. Copenhagen, Denmark. Copenhagen is just about 3 degrees south of Juneau, Alaska. Okay? So the excuse that, oh, we're not sunny and whatever, they're already doing that. 50% of the energy needs, and that's happening today. And by the way, that beautiful architecture, that's all solar. Okay? That's a thin film on top of the solar and so on. Solar, why? Because solar is a technology. And the cost of solar has gone down from $100 a watt to 33 cents a watt. Actually, 27. Or 30, what is it? Yeah, 300 times cheaper today than it was in 1970. And every 2 years since the year 2000, the installed base of solar has doubled. Doubled every 2 years. That's a 41% yearly improvement. So despite all the FUD news is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Despite all the FUD news, solar has been doubling every 2 years since since the year 1990. So figure that now solar is about 1.5% of world generation. How many more doublings does it take for solar to go to 100%? 3%, 6%, 12%, 24, 48. That's it. 6 more doublings, okay? 6 or 7 more doublings, and solar is 100%. Now, can solar really do that? Let me compare. Every single form of energy, every single form of traditional energy has gone up in prices. Coal, oil, etc., by 6 to 16 times. Nukes have gone up by 16 times at least since 1970, even when solar has gone down by 300 times. When you combine these numbers, this is what you get. Solar has improved on a cost basis by anywhere by several thousand, 5,000 times relative to the daily price of oil or nukes or whatever. And this is going to keep improving. I mean, solar is going to be half what it is by 2020, so double these numbers, right? And so it's, solar in about 80% of the world is already achieving what's called grid parity, which means that unsubsidized solar on your rooftop, not just yours, not just residential, but commercial, IKEA, hotels, Walmart, Walgreens, and so on. 80% of world markets, by the end of this year, solar will be at or below what we pay for electricity prices. 80%. Not bad for an industry in crisis, right? And 69% of corporations are considering solar today, according to PwC. 69. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to buy today, but it does mean that when the cost of solar gets to a certain point, they will pull the trigger. Not because of climate reasons, not because of goody-goody reasons, but because it makes selfish economic sense for these companies to do that. Such as in Las Vegas, Mandalay Bay has already installed the largest solar array on a rooftop anywhere in the US. Why? Because it makes economic sense. So in fact, the cost curve for solar is going to accelerate, and this is what's going to make it accelerate even faster. When the cost of solar rooftop is cheaper, not just than what we pay for electricity to the utilities, but it's cheaper than the cost of transmission. So think about that. If it's cheaper than the cost of transmission, it means that even if central generation costs are zero, when you add transmission, it's still going to be more expensive than rooftop solar. And that is already happening in many countries around the world. It's already happening in Australia, for instance. So this is not, again, in the future. In California, rooftop solar is going to be 4 cents by 2019, 2020. 4 cents, which is less than the cost of transmission. Boom. Here in LA, essentially it's going to be in everyone's selfish economic interest to put up solar on their rooftop because it makes economic sense. So at that point, central generation is obsolete. Anything that distributed solar can eat, it will eat. It won't generate 100% of all energy, but whatever is left, which is, of course, we'll still need to power data centers and aluminum smelters and so on. What are we going to use for that? Here's the cost of solar. In the US, it's already at 4 cents. 4 cents. Actually, it's less than that, unsubsidized. So if you add back the subsidies and so on, it's at about 4 cents. And just to give you an idea, 5.8 cents is equivalent to oil at $10 a barrel or natural gas at $5, right? Good luck for oil and gas competing with solar. It's already not competitive with solar, unsubsidized. And in fact, we're already way below this in many countries. Chile, 2.9 cents, Dubai, 2.4 cents, Abu Dhabi, 2.4 cents. So it's already half what it was just a few months ago, and it's still going down. So what distributed solar is not going to eat, utility scale solar is going to eat. And in countries that don't get enough sunshine all year, northern countries and so on, wind is going to be the complementary technology to complement solar when there is no sunshine and you can store it for weeks at a time. So let me take you back to the future. I started with this, right? Where one of the most massive disruptions in transportation in history, and it happened very quickly. Happened in 13 years. And what I'm saying today is that there is an even bigger disruption, because it's going to involve both energy and transportation, happening. Solar, batteries, electric vehicles, self-driving are going to essentially disrupt and obliterate all the infrastructure of energy and transportation as we know it. The tipping point, the convergence, is going to be 2020, and it's essentially going to be over by 2030. And I'll make this last point. This is not an energy transition. This is a technology disruption. This is going to happen despite governments, not because of governments. Thank you.
We have some time now to take some questions from the audience,
Okay.
but I do have one for you
Yes.
before we open up the floor. So there's a lot of information in what you just shared with us. If you could distill it into one piece of advice for governments, let's say the Korean government and the US government, if you had their ear today, what would you say to them?
I would say that that governments can help enable and accelerate this disruption in their own countries, and by doing that, they can essentially create the wealth and the technologies and the skills of the disruption and the trillions of dollars of wealth creation that are going to be enabled by this disruption in their countries, or they can help push it back. They can't stop it, but they can help push it back. And by doing that, essentially what they're doing is creating an economy that is uncompetitive, because it's going to be based on transportation and energy costs that are going to be 10 times higher than the disruptive technologies, and therefore they're going to be uncompetitive. So the governments that push back on basically this disruption are essentially deciding to make their citizens poorer. And they're going to use all kinds of excuses to do that, FUD news, and so on. But basically, those are the choices. You can help lead, or you can help follow. And if you help lead, then you can create the wealth that the disruptors will create in the next 10 to 20 years.
Oh, so you certainly have far-reaching ramifications of that.
Yes.
I see there's some questions already in the audience, so I know there's some microphones. I encourage you to wait for a microphone before you ask a question. There's one right here in the center, please. Please state your name as well.
Yes. When do you plan to tell this to our president?
I don't want to joke, but who's the president? Look, I've no jokes aside. I've been to Korea. By the way, my book, Clean Disruption, was translated to Korean 2 years ago, and it already became the #3 best-selling business book in Korea. So this message is already well known. I've been to Korea over the last couple of years several times, 6, 8 times, relaying this message to many members of government. So this is not something that the government of Korea is not aware of. It's just a matter of not knowledge, but acting on it. So far, Korea has many of the key technologies and many of the companies that can help, that can actually be disruptive. So the GM Bolt that I showed you was essentially designed in Korea. It uses LG Chem batteries and LG electronics. So this is a Korean car. Why aren't Korean companies doing it? It's electronics companies. This is a computer on wheel, right? Samsung has the SDI, has the batteries. It has the electronics. It has the technology. So the skills, the technologies, the infrastructure for Korea to be a winner in a wealth generator in this disruption is already there. The largest solar company in the world is Hanwha, right? So the issue is it's difficult to build solar in Korea, and they're selling solar everywhere, but Korea, for regulatory reasons, is pushing back, right? But it has the skills, it has the technologies, it can make it happen, and it can create the wealth. Yeah.
Okay. We have a few more minutes to take some other questions. Right over here, Arnie.
Hi, I'm Arnie Fishman, and I've been involved in this peripherally in the business of solar and electric car adoption. And consumers have not been adopting electric cars as quickly as things were forecast so far. And secondly, don't the batteries that are used to power the cars that are rated when they're new decline over time in terms of their
Right.
performance?
Okay. What's the question?
The first one is the adoption rate
Right.
of electric cars has been much slower than forecast so far.
Right.
And the second one is that the batteries decline in their capacity over time as you use them.
Right. Okay. So your question is, what's up with experts forecasting growth? Well, I started with that, right? They have no idea. But having said that, EVs have been growing at 70% per year, right? So keep that 70%. Yeah, of course, everything starts very small. Look, I was an early employee at little company called Cisco Systems. And at the time, basically folks said, internet, disrupt AT&T, are you serious? What are you smoking, right? Everything starts like that. Every disruptive technology starts like that. But by 2020, it's going to be in everybody's selfish economic interest to buy the car, right? Forget experts telling you anything. By 2020, maybe 2019, it's going to be in everybody's selfish economic interest to buy EVs with 200 miles, right? And that's going to change everything. Technology adoption moves like this as S-curves. And yeah, you start as tiny, but then at some point it tips, and basically it eats the market in about, whatever, a few years. And the S-curve has been accelerating for technologies. I mean, it took 75 years to reach 50 million users of telephone. And it took about 2 years to reach 50 million tablets. So, S-curves have been accelerating. And so the only question is, what is the tipping point, right? And you said something about solar? Yeah, battery. So, battery. So, yeah. So the indication, the evidence that we have from the two largest, basically, providers of EVs so far, Nissan and Tesla, is that batteries degrade, by about 100,000 miles. They degrade by about 5%. That's it. And the evidence that we're getting is that it may decline by about 8% for 200,000 miles, and by 20%, 500,000. That's, with the right usage and so on and so forth. So again, it's FUD news but the evidence, I'm talking about the actual evidence, says that that's what it is. Again, this company here in LA called Tesla, they're driving their Teslas 20,000 miles per month. And they've seen something like a 6% degradation in batteries after 200,000 miles. So, and more or less. So it's not, if you use it right, yeah, it's not that bad, and it's improving by the day, essentially. Yes?
Great. I think we have time for one more. Anne?
Thank you. You gave just a marvelous presentation, and thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
Question to ask you,
Yes.
which could be very stupid because you know much more about technology than I know, which can go in a thimble. I'm concerned about the transition period.
Yes.
At the time when maybe just a few cars that are equipped this way come online, and they're driving against people who are driving today, and a lot of them very badly. How does it work? How do you get over that hump? Is it a problem for the technology or not a problem? And if so, how do you avoid the problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. How do we transition from, basically having next to no self-driving to with people to all self-driving, which eventually it will happen. And essentially that's called deep learning. I mean, the artificial intelligence software that is used for self-driving is called deep learning, machine learning. It learns as it goes. So imagine that a company like Tesla has 100,000 vehicles with a certain level of self-driving, and they're gathering all kinds of data every day. And I think Tesla has already gathered 1.5 or so billion miles of data. They upload that data. Anything that happens, if there's one accident, that data gets uploaded to the server. They learn about that accident, and that gets downloaded to every car. So if a Tesla driver in Seoul learns how to avoid, I don't know, a cow or whatever, that doesn't happen, but it's just an example. Then that gets uploaded, and basically every Tesla driver within a few days, or every Tesla car knows how to drive that way, right? So it's a learning process. But the thing about machines is that they keep the learning in their operating system, which is what's different from human drivers, right? I mean, if we learn one thing, we may not really learn, but B, even if we do, that knowledge does not spread automatically but with machine learning it does. So the rate of learning, the rate of improvement in self-driving is actually accelerating to the point that, you know, some folks are talking about 0 fatalities within, you know, a few years, by 2020 or so. 0. I mean, we kill, by the way, 1.2 million people around the world in traffic accidents. We're not great drivers. And according to, you know, the NHTSA study of Tesla's data, Teslas are already 40% better than they used to be the year before. You know, that means they're already twice as good as human drivers. And if you keep that rate going, they'll be 5 times better, then 10 times better, and so on. And that doesn't include what I just mentioned, the artificial intelligence technology. So that is all learning, and, you know, in my, all the folks who are working on this essentially tell me that, you know, that by 2020, you know, self-driving, they're going to be way better than, an order of magnitude better than human beings.
Great, great. I know we're bumping up on time, and I'm sure there's more questions, but hopefully you'll be sticking around.
Yes,
And so if
I'll be
people have
around.
questions,
Yeah.
I encourage you to reach out to Tony. Thank you so much for a very stimulating
It's my
conversation.
pleasure.
Please join me. Thank you.